The silence of deep space was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of failing life support systems aboard the research vessel Artemis. Dr. Alara Miles floated in the command chair, her breath forming small clouds in the increasingly cold air as she stared at the endless void beyond the viewport. 16 cycles had passed since the engine failure that left her stranded in this desolate region of space, far from any Union patrol routes or inhabited systems. The void fields, as they were known in scientific circles, stretched for light years in every direction, a chaotic maze of spatial rifts and gravitational anomalies that the Galactic Union had abandoned 50 years ago after declaring them too dangerous for exploration. It was the perfect place for a xenoarchaeologist to conduct research on the mysterious rifts, but also the perfect place to die alone and forgotten. Calix Alara spoke into the silence, her voice hoarse from dehydration. Status report on the distress beacon. The ship's AI materialized as a soft blue hologram beside her chair, its form flickering slightly due to the power fluctuations. The emergency beacon has been transmitting for 16 cycles, Dr. Miles. No responses have been received from Union vessels or outposts. Alara closed her eyes, fighting back the despair that threatened to overwhelm her. The oxygen reserves would last perhaps another 2 cycles, maybe 3 if she entered stasis. But the stasis pod had been damaged in the same cascade failure that took out the main engines, leaving her trapped in a slow spiral toward death. "Continue monitoring all frequencies," she whispered. "And Calix, thank you for staying with me. It has been my honor to serve alongside you, Doctor. Your research on the rift phenomena has been invaluable to our understanding of—" "Contact," Calix's voice suddenly sharpened, cutting off his polite formalities. "Unknown vessel approaching on bearing 27 Mark IV. Configuration does not match any Union registry." Alara's eyes snapped open as she struggled to sit upright in the chair. On the main display, a small dot of light grew steadily larger against the starfield. As the sensors focused, the image resolved into something that made her heart race with both hope and confusion. The approaching ship was unlike anything in the Union fleet databases. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals and materials clearly jury-rigged and modified countless times. Angular sections that might have once belonged to mining vessels were welded alongside curved passenger compartments and what appeared to be military-grade weapon mounts. It looked like someone had taken pieces from a dozen different ships and somehow made them work together. "Calix, are you seeing this?" "Affirmative. The vessel appears to be of hybrid construction, incorporating elements from multiple ship classes across several decades of manufacturing. Most curious is the complete absence of Union identification codes or standardized equipment signatures." As they watched, the strange ship adjusted its course with surprising grace, despite its ramshackle appearance. A communication request appeared on Alara's console, transmitted on an open frequency, rather than the encrypted channels used by Union military and civilian vessels. "Research vessel Artemis, this is Captain Mara Quinn of the Salvation's Hope. We received your distress signal and are responding. Please confirm your status and crew count." Alara stared at the communication panel in amazement. The voice was definitely human, but the accent was unlike anything she had heard before, rough around the edges with inflections that suggested someone who had spent their entire life far from the core worlds. "Salvation's Hope. This is Dr. Alara Miles, sole survivor aboard the Artemis. My ship suffered catastrophic engine failure 16 cycles ago. Life support is critical, and I have no repair capability." There was a pause before the response came. "Understood, Dr. Miles. We're coming alongside for emergency docking. Prepare for rescue operations." "Captain Quinn." Alara transmitted back, unable to keep the relief from her voice. "I cannot thank you enough. May I ask? Your ship doesn't appear in any Union registry I'm familiar with." Another pause, longer this time. "That's because we're not Union, Doctor. We'll explain everything once you're safe aboard." Quinn out. Alara looked at Calix's holographic form as the mysterious ship grew larger on their screens. What do you make of this? The vessel's construction suggests independent engineering capabilities, far beyond what should be possible for non-Union entities. The power signatures indicate advanced fusion systems and what appears to be experimental drive technology. Most intriguing, Dr. I am detecting no alien technological signatures whatsoever. This appears to be an entirely human construction. But that's impossible. Humans have been part of the Union for over 2 centuries. There are no independent human colonies or fleets. Perhaps, Calix said quietly, our understanding of human dispersal throughout the galaxy has been incomplete. The Salvation's Hope maneuvered with practiced precision, matching the Artemis's slow tumble and extending a flexible docking tube. Through the viewport, Ilara could see figures in environmental suits moving along the other ship's hull, adjusting clamps and connection points with the efficiency of a crew that had performed such rescues many times before. A gentle vibration through the deck plates announced successful docking, followed by the hiss of atmospheric equalization. Ilara gathered her research data cores and personal effects into a small bag, then made her way to the airlock on unsteady legs. The artificial gravity on the Artemis had been fluctuating for days, leaving her weakened and disoriented. The airlock cycled, and Ilara found herself face to face with 3 humans in worn but well-maintained environmental suits. The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a woman in her 40s, with short cropped graying hair and eyes that held the kind of hardness that came from years of dangerous living. Dr. Miles, I'm Captain Mara Quinn. Welcome aboard the Salvation's Hope. Her handshake was firm and calloused. This is my chief engineer, Rook Hayes, and our navigator, Zara Lynn. Rook was a massive man with intricate tattoos covering his dark skin, while Zara appeared to be barely out of her teens with bright purple hair and cybernetic implants around her left temple. Both nodded respectfully as they were introduced. It's an honor to meet you all, Ilara said, still struggling to process the reality of her rescue. I have to ask, where exactly did you come from? This region of space has been abandoned by the Union for decades. Captain Quinn's expression grew grim. That's exactly why we're here, Doctor. The Union abandoned these regions because they're afraid of what's out here. But we've been mapping the rifts and studying their properties for years. Come on, let's get you somewhere more comfortable and we'll explain everything. As they moved through the ship's corridors, Ilara was struck by the ingenious way the vessel had been constructed. Every surface showed signs of modification and improvement, with systems and components that had clearly been salvaged from other ships and repurposed with remarkable skill. The crew they passed was diverse humans of every ethnicity she could identify, plus a few with features that suggested genetic modifications she didn't recognize. They arrived at what appeared to be a combination briefing room and mess hall, where Captain Quinn gestured for Ilara to take a seat at a worn metal table. Zara disappeared momentarily and returned with a steaming mug of something that smelled like coffee, but tasted far better than anything Ilara had experienced on Union worlds. Dr. Miles, Captain Quinn, began settling into a chair across from her. What do you know about the void fields and why the Union really abandoned them? Ilara considered her words carefully. The official records state that the spatial rifts in this region became too unstable for safe navigation after the expansion of the galactic trade routes. The risk-to-benefit ratio no longer justified maintaining outposts or regular patrols. And what do your scientific instincts tell you about that explanation? That it's complete nonsense, Ilara admitted. The rifts are dangerous, yes, but they're also incredibly valuable. The energy readings alone suggest technology that could revolutionize space travel. Any real scientist would want to study them, not run away. Captain Quinn nodded approvingly. You're smarter than most Union citizens, Doctor. The truth is, the Union didn't abandon this region because it was dangerous. They abandoned it because they found something here that scared them. Something they couldn't control or exploit. What kind of something? Evidence of the architects, Rook said quietly, speaking for the first time since the introductions. His voice carried a weight that suggested personal experience with whatever he was describing. Alara frowned. Architects, I've never heard that term in any xenoarchaeological context. That's because the Union has spent considerable effort making sure information about them doesn't reach the public. Zara added her fingers, dancing across a portable data tablet. They're an ancient species that apparently created the rift network throughout this galaxy. But according to the fragments we've managed to piece together, they didn't disappear, they went dormant. And now they're waking up, Captain Quinn concluded grimly. The Union made contact with them about 50 years ago, right around the time they abandoned the void fields. From what we've been able to learn, the architects offered the Union a deal access to their technology in exchange for certain considerations. What kind of considerations? Alara asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. Control, Captain Quinn said simply. The architects want to reshape galactic civilization according to their ancient designs. They see the current chaos of independent species and competing governments as inefficient. The Union agreed to help them implement a more orderly system in exchange for access to rift manipulation technology. Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. You're talking about some kind of galactic conquest. We're talking about the complete subjugation of every sentient species in the galaxy, Rook said bluntly. The architects view organic life as useful, but ultimately temporary. Their ideal galaxy is one where all species serve specific functions within a grand design they control completely. And the Union is helping them do this. The Union leadership believes they can maintain some autonomy within the architect's system, Zara explained. They think they're too valuable as administrators and enforcers to be discarded. They're wrong, of course, but by the time they realize it, it'll be too late. Captain Quinn leaned forward. Dr. Miles, your research into rift phenomena makes you one of the most knowledgeable people in the galaxy about architect technology. That's not a coincidence. We've been monitoring Union research projects, looking for scientists who might be useful to our cause. Your cause? The human resistance, Captain Quinn said with pride. We're part of a network of independent human colonies and ships that have been operating outside Union control for generations. Most of the galaxy doesn't even know we exist. The Union has been very careful to maintain the fiction that all humans are loyal citizens of their empire. Alara's mind reeled as she tried to process this information. How many of you are there? More than you might expect, fewer than we need, Captain Quinn replied diplomatically. But we're not the only ones resisting the Union Architect Alliance. There are dozens of minor species that have refused to submit to Union authority, plus sympathizers within the Union itself, who are beginning to understand what's really happening. Before Alara could respond, an urgent alarm began sounding throughout the ship. Zara's fingers flew across her tablet as data streamed across the display. Union Pursuit Squadron bearing 187 Mark 12, she announced tersely. 3 heavy cruisers and a battleship. They're moving fast. Captain Quinn was on her feet instantly. How long until they reach us? 18 minutes at their current speed. They must have been tracking the Artemis, Rook observed grimly. Probably wondering why a Union research vessel was operating in restricted space. Dr. Miles, Captain Quinn said urgently, I need to know right now, are you willing to trust us? Because if you want to be handed over to the Union authorities, now would be the time to say so. But if you want to learn the truth about what's really happening in this galaxy, you need to decide immediately. Alara looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people who had risked their lives to rescue a stranger, who were part of a resistance movement she hadn't even known existed an hour ago. The smart thing, the safe thing would be to request transfer back to Union custody. She would face some questions about her research in the void fields, but ultimately, she would return to her comfortable life on New Cambridge. But the smart thing wasn't always the right thing. I'm with you, she said firmly. But I hope you have a plan for dealing with those cruisers. Captain Quinn's grin was fierce and predatory. "Doctor, you're about to see why the Union is so afraid of what they found out here. Rook, prep the rift skip drive. Zara, find us the nearest stable aperture. And someone get our guest some proper ship clothes. She's about to become a permanent crew member." As the ship's crew burst into activity around her, Ilara felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration, unlike anything she had experienced in her scholarly life. Whatever happened next, her quiet existence as a Union researcher was over forever. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity, as the Salvation's Hope prepared for what Captain Quinn called emergency departure procedures. Ilara found herself in a small cabin, being helped into a worn but functional ship suit by a cheerful woman named Cass, who served as the ship's medic and quartermaster. "First time running from Union pursuit?" Cass asked with amusement as she adjusted the suit's environmental controls. "First time running from anyone, actually," Ilara admitted. "I'm not really the adventurous type." "You are now," Cass said with a grin. "Fair warning, rift skipping is rough even under the best circumstances. We're about to attempt it under combat conditions, which means it's going to be absolutely brutal. Try not to throw up on anyone important." Before Ilara could ask what rift skipping involved, the ship's intercom crackled to life with Captain Quinn's voice. "All hands prepare for emergency rift transit. Secure for combat maneuvering." Cass guided Ilara to a crash couch and helped her strap in, just as the ship lurched violently to one side. Through the small porthole in the cabin wall, Ilara could see flashes of weapon fire lighting up the void. The Union squadron had arrived ahead of schedule. Salvation's Hope. "This is Admiral Solis of the Union battleship Inexorable," a cold voice announced over the ship's communication system. "You are harboring a Union citizen and operating illegally in restricted space. Surrender immediately or face destruction." Captain Quinn's response was broadcast throughout the ship. "Admiral Solis, this is Captain Quinn. Dr. Miles was rescued under maritime salvage law from a disabled vessel. As for operating illegally, well, you're going to have to catch us first." The ship shook again as Union weapons found their mark, and Ilara could hear the hull groaning under stress. Through the porthole, she watched in amazement as the Salvation's Hope returned fire, with weapons that seemed impossibly powerful for a ship of its size. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out toward the pursuing Union vessels, forcing them to break formation and maneuver defensively. "Rift aperture located," Zara's voice announced over the intercom. "Distance 4,000 kilometers, bearing 095 Mark 6. "Beginning approach," Captain Quinn responded. "All hands brace for rift entry." Ilara had studied spatial rifts extensively, but she had never experienced transit through one personally. The Union considered them too dangerous for routine use, employing them only in the most extreme circumstances and with extensive safety protocols. Whatever the Salvation's Hope was about to attempt was far beyond anything in Union standard procedures. The ship's engines roared to life with an intensity that seemed to vibrate through every molecule of the vessel. Through the porthole, Ilara could see space itself beginning to twist and distort as they approached what looked like a crack in reality itself. The rift appeared as a jagged line of brilliant light against the stars, pulsing with energy that hurt to look at directly. "Union vessels are pursuing," Rook announced grimly. "They're trying to target our engines." "Let them try," Captain Quinn responded with confidence. "They don't have the stomach for what we're about to do." As they drew closer to the rift, Ilara began to understand why the Union considered such transits dangerous. Space around the aperture writhed and twisted in ways that violated every law of physics she understood. She could feel the ship's artificial gravity fluctuating wildly, and her inner ear reported conflicting information about which direction was up. "Transit in 10 seconds, Zara announced. 9, 8, 7. The Union squadron fired everything they had in a desperate attempt to disable the Salvation's Hope before it could escape. Ilara watched in terror as energy beams and projectiles streaked past the porthole, some coming close enough to light up the ship's deflector screens. 3, 2, 1, transit. Reality exploded around them as the ship plunged into the rift. Alara's vision filled with colors that didn't exist, and she felt her consciousness stretched across dimensions that her human brain wasn't equipped to process. Time seemed to become negotiable. She experienced the transit as both an instant and an eternity, while sound and sensation blended into a symphony of impossible sensations. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos ended. The Salvation's hope burst out of the rift into normal space, and Alara found herself looking out at a completely different starfield. Behind them, the rift sealed itself with a flash of light that left afterimages across her retinas. "Transit successful," Zara announced, her voice shaky but triumphant. "Union Squadron did not pursue. They broke off approach when we entered the aperture." "Cowards," Rook muttered with satisfaction. "Union military doctrine considers rift skipping too dangerous for pursuit operations." As the ship settled into normal flight, Cass helped Alara out of the crash couch and back toward the common areas. Her legs felt like rubber, and her head was spinning from the after-effects of the rift transit, but she was amazed to discover that she felt more alive than she had in years. "How did you learn to do that?" she asked Captain Quinn, when they reassembled in the briefing room. "Rift navigation is supposed to be impossible without massive computational support and specialized equipment." "It is impossible using Union methods," Captain Quinn admitted. "But the Union doesn't know everything about rift technology. We've spent decades studying architect installations in this region, learning how they really work. The rifts aren't just transportation, they're part of a vast network that spans the entire galaxy. Once you understand the underlying principles, navigation becomes a matter of reading the currents." "Like sailing on an ocean," Zara added enthusiastically. "The architects built the rift network like a three-dimensional sea with currents and tides and weather patterns. The Union treats each rift as an isolated phenomenon, but they're all connected." Alara felt her scientific mind racing as she considered the implications. "If you're right, then, the rift network could be used for instantaneous travel across galactic distances. The Union could have colonies in other galaxies by now." "They could," Captain Quinn agreed grimly. "But they won't, because the architects won't let them. The network serves the architects' purposes, not ours. They're allowing limited access to keep the Union cooperative. But the moment humanity becomes too independent or too powerful, access will be cut off." "Which is why we need to act before that happens," Rook added. "The Resistance has been gathering intelligence on architect installations throughout the void fields. We've learned enough to begin sabotage operations, but we need someone who understands the underlying science." "Someone like you, Dr. Miles," Captain Quinn said meaningfully. "Your research into rift energy patterns is exactly what we need to begin disrupting the architect's control systems." Alara felt the weight of their expectations settling on her shoulders. "You're asking me to help you wage war against beings that have technology millions of years ahead of ours." "We're asking you to help us level the playing field," Captain Quinn corrected. "The architects are powerful, but they're not omnipotent. They've been dormant for millennia, and their technology is designed for efficiency rather than adaptability. They expect compliance, not resistance. That gives us advantages they don't anticipate." Before the conversation could continue, Zara looked up from her data tablet with concern. "Captain, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the region. Something big is happening near the Nexus." Captain Quinn's expression grew grim. "Define something big." "Rift activity is increasing exponentially. It looks like someone is activating dormant apertures across multiple sectors simultaneously. The energy patterns match theoretical models for large-scale network manipulation." "The architects," Rook said quietly. "They're mobilizing." Captain Quinn stood and moved to the main display, which now showed a three-dimensional map of local space, marked with dozens of pulsing lights, representing active rifts. "This is what we've been afraid of. The Union must have given them something they wanted permission to begin the next phase of their plan." "What's the next phase?" Alara asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. "Consolidation," Captain Quinn replied grimly. The architects are going to use the Rift network to relocate entire star systems, reorganizing the galaxy, according to their grand design. Billions of people will be displaced or killed in the process. Alara stared at the display in horror. That's genocide on a galactic scale. Which is why we can't let it happen, Captain Quinn said firmly. Zara, set course for the Nexus. We need to get word to the other resistance cells about what's happening. Captain, Zara said hesitantly, the Nexus is heavily guarded. Union and Architect forces have been increasing security around the installation for weeks. Then we'll have to be very careful, Captain Quinn replied. Dr. Miles, I hope you're ready for advanced education in unconventional warfare, because we're about to attempt something that could save or damn the entire galaxy. As the Salvation's Hope adjusted course toward whatever the Nexus was, Ilara found herself at the center of events, far beyond anything she had imagined when she set out to study spatial rifts. Her quiet life as a researcher was truly over. Now, she was part of a resistance movement fighting for the future of organic life in the galaxy. The journey to the Nexus took 3 days, during which Ilara received intensive education in the reality of galactic politics, as understood by the human resistance. Captain Quinn and her crew shared intelligence reports, recorded communications, and first-hand accounts that painted a picture very different from the official Union narrative she had grown up believing. The Galactic Union, she learned, was not the benevolent federation of species working together for mutual prosperity that Union propaganda portrayed. Instead, it was a rigid hierarchy dominated by a few powerful species, with humans serving as middle management in a system designed to extract resources and labor from countless minor species throughout the galaxy. The beauty of the Union system, Rook explained, as they reviewed intelligence reports in the ship's small library, is that most species never realize they're being exploited. The Union provides just enough benefits protection from raiders' access to galactic markets' technological advancement to keep people satisfied with their place in the hierarchy. But the architects represent something even worse, Zara added, pulling up holographic displays of translated architect communications. They don't want to exploit organic life, they want to perfect it. According to their philosophy, the current state of galactic civilization is chaotic and inefficient. They believe they can design a better system. Ilara studied the alien script, flowing across the displays, noting patterns that suggested mathematical, rather than linguistic thinking. These communications read more like engineering specifications than political documents. Exactly, Captain Quinn said approvingly. The architects don't see the difference between redesigning a star system and redesigning a civilization. To them, organic life is just another resource to be optimized for maximum efficiency. What would that optimization look like in practice? Based on archaeological evidence from other galaxies where the architects have been active, Rook replied grimly. It involves relocating entire populations to serve specific functions, genetic modification to enhance useful traits, while eliminating undesirable ones, and the elimination of species or individuals that don't fit the design parameters. Ilara felt sick as she considered the implications. It's not conquest, it's gardening on a galactic scale. Now you understand why we resist, Captain Quinn said quietly. The Union leadership believes they can negotiate terms that will preserve human autonomy within the architect's system. They're wrong. The architects don't negotiate, they design, implement, and optimize. On the second day of travel, Ilara was introduced to other members of the ship's crew and began to understand the diverse nature of the human resistance. In addition to baseline humans like herself, the crew included individuals whose genetics had been modified for life in various environments, some with enhanced bone density for high-gravity worlds, others with improved lung capacity for thin atmospheres, and a few with more exotic adaptations she couldn't immediately identify. The Union considers genetic modification outside strict medical parameters to be illegal, Captain Quinn explained when Ilara asked about the crew's diversity. They claim it's for public safety, but the real reason is that modified humans are harder to control. We represent evolution beyond what they consider acceptable. How long has the resistance been active? Officially, about 50 years since the Union first made contact with the architects. Unofficially, there have been independent human colonies and ships operating outside Union control for over a century. We just didn't have a unified cause until the architect threat emerged. On the third day, they approached the Nexus, a massive installation built around what appeared to be a natural rift cluster in deep space. As they drew closer, Ilara could see that the station was a fusion of Union and architect architecture, with the familiar geometric designs of Union engineering, merged with flowing organic structures that seemed to shift and change as she watched. The Nexus serves as a coordination center for Rift network operations throughout this sector, Zara explained, as they studied the installation from a safe distance. Union personnel handle day-to-day administration, while architect systems manage the actual network control functions. And our mission here is intelligence gathering primarily, Captain Quinn replied. We need to understand the scope of the architect's current operations and identify potential targets for sabotage. But we also need to deliver a package to resistance contacts inside the station. There are resistance members working on a Union architect installation? Sympathizers mostly, Rook clarified. Union personnel who have begun to understand what they're really supporting. They provide intelligence and occasionally assist with sabotage operations, but they can't act openly without exposing themselves. Captain Quinn turned to Ilara with a serious expression. Dr. Miles, I want you to understand that what we're about to attempt is extremely dangerous. If we're discovered, the best we can hope for is quick death. The architects have unpleasant methods for dealing with resistance. What kind of methods? They can modify organic minds the same way they modify everything else, Zara said quietly. Turn you into a perfectly compliant tool for whatever function they need filled. You remain conscious throughout the process. You just lose the ability to want anything other than what they want you to want. Ilara shuddered as she considered the implications. That's worse than death. Much worse, Captain Quinn agreed. Which is why we have protocols for situations where capture becomes inevitable. But I don't expect it to come to that. This is a reconnaissance mission, not an assault. As they prepared for infiltration of the Nexus, Ilara found herself thinking about the path that had brought her to this point. Just days ago, her biggest concern had been completing her research on rift energy patterns. Now, she was part of a galactic resistance movement, preparing to infiltrate an installation controlled by beings that could reshape reality itself. The irony wasn't lost on her, that her expertise in rift phenomena, the very thing that had led to her being stranded in the void fields, was now making her valuable to people fighting for the freedom of organic life throughout the galaxy. Sometimes, she reflected the universe had a twisted sense of humor. The infiltration of the Nexus proved to be both easier and more terrifying than Ilara had expected. The Salvation's Hope approached the massive installation disguised as a Union supply transport, using identification codes provided by resistance sympathizers within the station's administration. The beauty of the Union bureaucracy. Captain Quinn explained, as they waited for clearance to dock, is that it's so complex and compartmentalized that nobody really knows what anyone else is supposed to be doing. As long as you have the right codes and paperwork, you can go almost anywhere. They were directed to a cargo bay deep within the station's commercial section, where they were met by a nervous-looking Union administrator named Marcus Webb. He was a thin man in his 50s, with the pale complexion of someone who spent his entire life in artificial environments, and his hands shook slightly as he checked their manifests. Captain Quinn, he said, quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't being observed. I wasn't expecting you for another week. Plans changed, Quinn replied tersely. Recent architect activity forced us to accelerate our timeline. Do you have the information we requested? Webb nodded and produced a small data storage device. construction schedules for the new installation's personnel rosters, for architect liaison positions, and traffic control data for Rift network activity. Everything you asked for. What about the package we need delivered? Level 7, Section C, Lab Complex 14. Dr. Sarah Kim is expecting you. She's the xenobiologist working on the architect's specimen analysis project. Webb paused, then added nervously, "Captain, whatever you're planning, you need to be careful. Security has been increased significantly over the past few days. There are rumors that the architects are becoming impatient with the pace of union cooperation." What kind of rumors? Personnel reassignments to what they're calling optimization facilities. Scientists and engineers who have been asking too many questions about architect technology suddenly receiving transfers to locations that don't exist in any union database. Captain Quinn's expression darkened. How many people are we talking about? Dozens, maybe hundreds across the entire network. The official explanation is that they're being assigned to classified research projects, but Webb trailed off, unable to voice his obvious suspicions. But you think they're being taken for processing? Quinn finished grimly. Webb nodded miserably. I've tried to research the facilities they're supposedly being transferred to. According to every database I can access, they simply don't exist. The people being transferred just disappear. Alara felt a chill as she realized the implications. The architects were already beginning to harvest useful individuals for their optimization programs. How long before the process expanded to include entire populations? We need to move quickly, Captain Quinn decided. Dr. Miles, you're coming with me to deliver the package to Dr. Kim. Your scientific credentials will help us blend in if we encounter security. Rook Zara, monitor communications and be ready for emergency departure. As they made their way through the station's corridors, Alara was struck by the subtle but unmistakable signs of architect influence throughout the installation. The walls themselves seemed slightly organic, with surfaces that appeared to pulse gently, as if they were alive. The lighting was more complex than standard union fixtures, providing illumination that somehow felt more natural despite coming from artificial sources. Architect Biotechnology. Captain Quinn explained quietly when Alara commented on the unusual features. They don't build things the way we do, they grow them. Every surface you see is technically alive, capable of self-repair and modification according to programmed parameters. That's both fascinating and terrifying, Alara admitted. The level of control required to create living architecture is beyond anything I can imagine. Now imagine that same level of control applied to organic beings, Quinn replied grimly. That's what we're fighting to prevent. They reached level 7 without incident, passing through several security checkpoints, where Quinn's forged credentials and Alara's legitimate union identification allowed them access to restricted areas. The deeper they went into the station, the more obvious the architect modifications became. By the time they reached the laboratory complex, they were walking through corridors that felt more like the inside of some vast organism than a technological construct. Lab Complex 14 was a series of interconnected chambers filled with equipment that combined union engineering with architect biotechnology in ways that made Alara's scientific mind real with possibilities. In one corner, a standard union molecular analyzer was connected via organic conduits to what appeared to be a living computational matrix that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Dr. Sarah Kim was a woman in her 40s, with the intense focus of someone accustomed to working with dangerous materials under demanding conditions. She looked up from a microscopy station as they entered, her expression shifting from annoyance to recognition to fear in rapid succession. "Captain Quinn," she said quietly, glancing toward the lab's entrance. "You shouldn't be here. Security has been increased throughout the research levels." "We know," Quinn replied, producing a small package from her jacket. "But this couldn't wait. The network analysis you requested, we've confirmed your suspicions about the quantum entanglement protocols." Dr. Kim accepted the package with hands that trembled slightly. "How bad is it?" "Worse than you thought. They're not just using quantum entanglement for communication, they're using it for consciousness transfer. The optimization facilities Webb told you about aren't research centers. They're processing plants. The color drained from Dr. Kim's face. My God, the specimens I've been analyzing, the neural tissue samples from volunteer subjects, were probably taken from people who asked too many questions, Quinn finished grimly. The architects can extract knowledge and personality patterns from organic neural tissue and integrate them into their biotechnological systems. They're not eliminating troublesome individuals, they're harvesting them. Alara felt sick as the full horror of the situation became clear. They're turning people into components in their biological machines. Worse, Dr. Kim said in a shaky voice. According to the data I've been analyzing, the consciousness transfer process preserves awareness. The harvested individuals remain conscious and aware, but they lose the ability to act independently. They become living tools that remember being human. Before anyone could respond to this revelation, an alarm began sounding throughout the laboratory complex. Red lights flashed, and a mechanical voice announced, "Security Alert Level 7. All personnel remain in current positions for verification procedures." "That's not good," Captain Quinn said grimly, moving toward the lab's entrance to check the corridor beyond. "Captain," Dr. Kim said urgently, "there's something else you need to know. The architects are accelerating their timeline. Based on the construction schedules I've seen, they're planning to begin large-scale population relocations within the next few months. Relocations to where? Processing facilities disguised as colonial development projects. The Union is advertising them as opportunities for citizens to pioneer new worlds, but they're actually collection points for optimization programs." Captain Quinn's expression grew increasingly grim as she processed this information. "How many people are we talking about?" "Millions, potentially billions over the next few years. The architects have apparently decided that gradual infiltration is too slow. They're moving to direct intervention." The security alert continued to blare as armed Union guards began moving through the corridors beyond the lab. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Ilara could see them checking each room, systematically, clearly searching for unauthorized personnel. "Is there another way out of here?" Quinn asked urgently. Dr. Kim nodded toward a maintenance access panel in the far wall. "Emergency evacuation route leads to the cargo transport systems. But Captain, if they catch you here, they'll interrogate me about why you came to see me." "Then you'll have to come with us," Quinn replied without hesitation. "Your research is too valuable to lose and you're too exposed to remain here safely." "I can't abandon my work." "Your work won't matter if the architects succeed in their optimization program," Alara interjected. "Captain Quinn is right. You need to come with us." As the security guards drew closer to their location, Dr. Kim made her decision. She grabbed several data storage devices from her workstation and activated an emergency deletion protocol that would destroy the remaining research files. "All right, let's go. But I hope you have a plan for getting off this station." "We always have a plan," Captain Quinn said with more confidence than the situation seemed to warrant. "Follow me." The emergency evacuation route proved to be a cramped maintenance tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridors, providing access to the station's environmental and power systems. As they crawled through the confined space, Ilara could hear guards searching the laboratories they had just left behind. "They're being very thorough," Dr. Kim observed quietly. "This isn't a routine security check, they're looking for something specific." "Probably us," Quinn replied grimly. "Someone must have reported our presence to station security." They emerged from the maintenance tunnel in a cargo handling area, several levels below the laboratory complex, where automated systems moved containers between transport ships and storage facilities. The area was largely automated, with minimal human supervision, providing good cover for their movement toward the docking bays. "Salvation's Hope, this is Quinn." Captain Quinn transmitted via a secure communicator. "Package delivered, but we've got complications. Prepare for emergency departure." "Understood, Captain." Rook's voice crackled back through static. Station security is conducting systematic searches of all docked vessels. We may need to depart without clearance. Do whatever's necessary. We're moving toward Docking Bay 7 now. As they made their way through the cargo handling area, Ilara noticed that many of the containers were labeled with destinations. She didn't recognize colony worlds that weren't in any Union database she was familiar with. When she pointed this out to Captain Quinn, the older woman's expression grew even more grim. "Those are probably the processing facilities Dr. Kim mentioned," Quinn said quietly, "disguised as colonial supply shipments. How can the Union justify shipping millions of people to colonies that don't officially exist?" "By creating the official records after the fact," Dr. Kim replied bitterly. "The Union bureaucracy is very good at retroactive documentation. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the processing will be complete, and the victims will be too modified to complain." They reached Docking Bay 7 without further incident, but as they approached the Salvation's Hope, it became clear that departure would not be simple. Union security forces had surrounded the ship and were conducting what appeared to be a detailed inspection of its cargo and systems. "Captain Quinn," a uniformed officer called out as they approached, "please remain where you are for identification verification." Quinn smiled pleasantly, while her hand moved slowly toward the weapon concealed beneath her jacket. "Of course, officer. Is there some problem with our documentation?" "Routine security check, ma'am. We're looking for unauthorized personnel who may have infiltrated the station." "I see. Well, we're happy to cooperate with station security. Our ship's manifest should be in order." As the officer began checking their identification against his data tablet, Ilara noticed movement in the shadows around the docking bay. More security personnel were moving into position, clearly preparing for some kind of action. Whatever was about to happen, it wouldn't be routine. "Captain Quinn," the officer said slowly, "according to our records, your ship is registered as a cargo transport, but our scans indicate the presence of military-grade weapons and defensive systems." "Well," Quinn replied with a grin that didn't reach her eyes, "you can never be too careful in deep space. Pirates and raiders, you know. Ma'am, I'm going to need you and your companions to come with me for additional questioning." That was when everything went wrong very quickly. Quinn's weapon appeared in her hand with practiced speed, while Ilara heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging from multiple positions around the docking bay. Dr. Kim grabbed Ilara's arm and pulled her toward the cover of a cargo container as the situation exploded into violence. "Rook," Quinn shouted into her communicator, while returning fire at the security forces, "emergency departure now." The Salvation's Hope's engines roared to life as the ship's weapon systems activated, sending energy beams lancing out at the security forces surrounding the docking bay. The station's defensive systems responded immediately, filling the space around them with weapons fire and debris as both sides fought for tactical advantage. "This way," Dr. Kim shouted, leading Ilara toward the ship's boarding ramp as Captain Quinn provided covering fire. "Stay low and move fast." They reached the ship just as Zara brought the main engines online, creating a controlled explosion of plasma that cleared the immediate area of hostile forces. As they scrambled aboard, Ilara could see Union reinforcements moving toward their position from multiple directions. Everyone aboard, Rook's voice demanded over the ship's intercom. "Everyone's here," Quinn responded as she sealed the boarding hatch. "Get us out of here." The Salvation's Hope lifted off from the docking bay with an urgency that pushed its engines beyond safe operating parameters. As they accelerated away from the Nexus, the station's defensive systems opened fire with everything they had, forcing Zara to execute evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible with a standard Union vessel. "Where's the nearest rift?" Quinn demanded, as she strapped herself into a crash couch. 2,000 kilometers bearing 117 Mark 8, Zara replied tersely. "But it's heavily guarded by Union patrol vessels." "Then we'll have to go through them," Quinn decided grimly. "Rook, charge the quantum disruptor. If we're going to fight our way out, we might as well make it memorable." As the ship raced toward the rift that would carry them to safety, Ilara found herself holding onto her crash couch with white knuckles, while energy beams flashed past the viewports. The peaceful existence she had known just days ago seemed like a memory from another lifetime. But as terrifying as the situation was, she realized that she had never felt more alive. For the first time in her life, she was part of something that truly mattered, a fight for the future of organic life throughout the galaxy. Whatever happened next, she was committed to seeing it through to the end. The battle to reach the rift was unlike anything Alara had experienced or imagined. The Salvation's Hope faced off against 3 Union patrol vessels, each significantly larger and more heavily armed than the converted transport. But what the Resistance ship lacked in firepower, it made up for in maneuverability and the desperate determination of its crew. "Quantum disruptor charged and ready," Rook announced as Union energy beams hammered their shields. "Fire when you have a clear shot," Quinn ordered, then turned to Dr. Kim and Alara. "You might want to close your eyes for this next part." The quantum disruptor fired, with a sound like reality tearing apart. Alara watched in amazement as space around the leading Union vessel began to twist and fold, creating gravitational anomalies that sent the ship tumbling out of control. The weapon didn't destroy the vessel so much as relocate it to a slightly different dimension, effectively removing it from the battle without killing its crew. "That's why the Union fears us," Captain Quinn said with satisfaction as they raced past the disabled patrol ship. "We understand their technology better than they do." They reached the rift with Union reinforcements closing in from multiple directions, but Zara's expert navigation carried them into the spatial aperture, just as the largest Union battleship arrived within firing range. Once again, Alara experienced the disorienting sensation of rift transit, though this time she was somewhat prepared for the experience. When they emerged into normal space, they found themselves in a region that looked completely different from anything Alara had seen before. Instead of the usual scattered stars and empty void, they were surrounded by a complex network of artificial structures that extended as far as the sensors could detect. "Welcome to the Free Zone," Captain Quinn announced with pride. "The largest concentration of independent human settlements in known space." What Alara saw through the viewports defied every assumption she had made about human capabilities in space. Massive habitat rings rotated slowly around artificial suns, while mining platforms extracted resources from asteroids that had been hollowed out and converted into manufacturing centers. Ships of every conceivable design moved between the installations, many of them incorporating technological innovations she didn't recognize. "How long has this been here?" she asked in amazement. "The core installations are about 70 years old," Dr. Kim replied, apparently as impressed as Alara, despite having heard about the Free Zone before. "But the population has been growing exponentially as more people learn the truth about the Union Architect Alliance." "We're home," Captain Quinn announced as they approached a massive space station that appeared to have been constructed from dozens of different ship hulls, welded together into a single structure. "Central Command for the Human Resistance and your new base of operations, Dr. Miles." As they docked with the station, Alara realized that her transformation from Union scientist to Resistance member was now complete. The research data she carried from her time aboard the Artemis, combined with the intelligence they had gathered from the Nexus, would help the Resistance understand and counter the Architect threat. But more than that, she had found something she had never known. She was looking for a purpose that extended beyond her own academic interests. The fight against the Architects would require every resource the Resistance could muster, and her expertise in rift phenomena could be crucial to their success. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Alara integrated into the Resistance's research programs and contributed her knowledge to their understanding of Architect technology. The Free Zone's facilities were far more advanced than anything the Union had led her to believe was possible for independent human settlements, with research laboratories and manufacturing capabilities that rivaled the best Union installations. "The secret," explained Dr. Marcus Reynolds, the Resistance's chief scientist, is that we've been developing technology independently for decades, without the limitations imposed by union regulations and architect influence. When you're not constrained by bureaucratic approval processes and political considerations, scientific progress accelerates dramatically. Alara's research into rift energy patterns proved invaluable for understanding the architect network control systems. Working with data gathered from installations throughout the void fields, she began to identify weaknesses in the quantum entanglement protocols that maintain the network's stability. The architect's greatest strength is also their greatest vulnerability, she explained to a gathered assembly of resistance leaders and scientists. They've created a network so integrated and interdependent that disrupting key nodes could cause cascading failures throughout entire sectors. "What kind of disruption are we talking about?" asked Admiral Sarah Chen, the Resistance's military commander. "Quantum interference at specific frequencies, delivered simultaneously to multiple network nodes," Alara replied, displaying her analysis on the room's holographic projectors. "If we can synchronize our attacks properly, we could collapse large portions of the network before the architects can implement countermeasures." Captain Quinn, who had been promoted to lead the Resistance's Special Operations Division, leaned forward with interest. "How many ships would we need for a coordinated attack?" "That depends on our target," Alara said, manipulating the display to show different scenarios. "To disrupt regional network operations, we'd need perhaps a dozen ships with quantum disruptor capabilities. But to threaten the core network infrastructure..." "How many?" Admiral Chen pressed. "Every ship we have, plus support from any Union personnel still loyal to organic life, rather than architect efficiency." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. What Alara was proposing wasn't just a military operation, it was a galactic war that would determine the future of organic civilization. "The architects won't simply accept the destruction of their network," Dr. Reynolds observed grimly. "They'll respond with everything they have. Which is why we need to coordinate with resistance cells throughout the galaxy," Captain Quinn replied. "If we're going to do this, it has to be overwhelming and simultaneous. We need to hit them so hard they can't recover." Over the following months, the resistance worked to build the coalition necessary for their desperate plan. Messages were sent through hidden communication networks to human settlements, alien species, and Union personnel throughout the galaxy, seeking support for what they began calling Liberation Day. The response was overwhelming. Apparently, the architects' acceleration of their optimization programs had created fear and resentment throughout the galaxy, and species that had previously accepted Union authority were now willing to risk everything for freedom. "We have confirmation from 47 species," Admiral Chen reported during one of their planning sessions. "Everything from major civilizations like the Zephyrians to minor species that most people have never heard of. They're all willing to participate in coordinated attacks on architect installations." "What about Union personnel?" Captain Quinn asked. "More than we expected, fewer than we need," Chen replied diplomatically. "The Union's propaganda machine is very effective, and most people still believe the official story about beneficial cooperation with advanced aliens. But we do have sympathizers in key positions who can provide intelligence and sabotage operations." As Liberation Day approached, Ilara found herself at the center of preparations for the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. Her research had identified the critical network nodes that would need to be neutralized simultaneously, and she had worked with the Resistance's engineers to develop weapons specifically designed to disrupt architect quantum entanglement systems. "You realize," Dr. Reynolds said during one of their final planning sessions, "that if this fails, the architects will accelerate their optimization programs. Billions of people could be processed within months." "And if we don't try," Alara replied grimly, "those same billions will be processed anyway, just more slowly. At least this way, we have a chance." The night before Liberation Day, Alara stood at the observation deck of Central Command, looking out at the assembled fleet of resistance ships preparing for battle. Hundreds of vessels of every conceivable design floated in the void, their crews making final preparations for an operation that would either save organic civilization or doom it to eternal servitude. Captain Quinn joined her at the viewport, the older woman's expression thoughtful as she watched the activity outside. Having second thoughts, Doctor, about the operation, no. About my place in it. Alara paused, considering her words carefully. A year ago, I was a Union scientist focused on abstract research. Now I'm helping plan a galactic war. Sometimes I wonder if I'm qualified for this kind of responsibility. Nobody's qualified for this, Quinn replied with a slight smile. That's what makes it worth doing. If the choice was between certain success and certain failure, it wouldn't really be a choice at all. What do you think our chances are? Honestly, maybe 50-50. But those are better odds than we had when we started, and much better than we'll have if we wait. As they talked, other members of the Resistance gathered at the observation deck, all of them drawn by the same need to witness this moment before the battle began. Dr. Kim was there, along with Rook and Zara from the Salvation's Hope crew, Admiral Chen and her staff, and dozens of others who had committed their lives to the fight for freedom. Tomorrow, Admiral Chen announced to the assembled group, "We either win back our galaxy or die trying. Either way, we go forward with the knowledge that we stood up for what we believed in when it mattered most." A cheer went up from the crowd, but Alara noticed that it was muted by the gravity of what they were about to attempt. Everyone present understood that many of them would not survive the next few days, and that even victory would come at a terrible cost. But as she looked around at the faces of her companions, humans and aliens united in common cause, Alara realized that she had found something more valuable than safety or certainty. She had found purpose and people worth fighting for. Liberation Day began with the simultaneous activation of quantum disruptors at 1,700 locations throughout the galaxy. For the first time in millennia, the Architect Network experienced coordinated resistance on a scale that threatened its fundamental operations. Alara monitored the attack from Central Command's Operations Center, watching as real-time reports flooded in from resistance cells across known space. The initial results were better than their most optimistic projections. The quantum interference was disrupting network operations exactly as her calculations had predicted. Regional nodes in Sectors 7 through 15 are offline, reported the operations coordinator. Network traffic in the core worlds has dropped by 60%. What about Architect response? Admiral Chen demanded. Limited so far. They appear to be focusing on defensive measures rather than retaliation. But even as the reports came in, Alara could see the Architects beginning to adapt to their attack. The network was vast and redundant with backup systems and alternative routing protocols that allowed damaged sections to be bypassed. Unless they could maintain the pressure and expand their attacks to secondary targets, the Architects would eventually restore full functionality. Captain Quinn, Admiral Chen ordered, "Take the Special Operations Fleet and hit the backup nodes in Sector 12. Dr. Miles' analysis indicates they'll be critical for network restoration efforts." Understood, Quinn replied, from the bridge of the Salvation's Hope. We're moving to attack position now. As the battle expanded throughout the galaxy, Alara found herself coordinating with resistance scientists on dozens of worlds, adjusting their attack patterns based on real-time network analysis. The Architects were responding faster than expected, implementing countermeasures that required constant adaptation of their tactics. "They're rerouting through the tertiary nodes in the Outer Rim," she announced to the Operations Center. "If we don't disrupt those connections within the next hour, they'll restore full network functionality." "Our nearest forces are 6 hours away from those positions," the operations coordinator replied grimly. "Then we need to find another solution," Admiral Chen decided. "Dr. Miles, is there any way to cascade the quantum interference to reach those nodes without direct attack?" Alara studied the network displays, rapidly looking for connections that could be exploited. The Architect network was designed with multiple layers of redundancy, but that same complexity created opportunities for creative interference. "There's a possibility," she said slowly. If we can overload the primary relays in Sector 9, the feedback should propagate through the quantum entanglement matrix to the tertiary nodes. But it would require sacrificing our attack forces in that sector. The overload would destroy any ships within the interference field. The operations center fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Admiral Chen turned to the communication station. "Get me Captain Morrison of Battle Group 7. Within minutes, the weathered face of a middle-aged woman appeared on the main display. "Admiral Chen, this is Morrison. My group is engaging architect installations in Sector 9 as ordered. Captain, we need you to implement Emergency Protocol 7. Can you comply?" Morrison's expression grew grim as she understood what was being asked. Emergency Protocol 7 was the code for sacrifice operations attacks that would accomplish critical objectives at the cost of the forces involved. "Understood, Admiral. My crews are aware of the stakes. We'll implement the protocol immediately." "Thank you, Captain. The galaxy won't forget your sacrifice." As they watched the displays, Ilara saw the energy signatures from Battle Group 7 suddenly spike far beyond normal parameters. The ships were deliberately overloading their quantum disruptors, creating interference patterns that would propagate through the network but would also destroy everything in the immediate area. The sacrifice of Battle Group 7 achieved exactly what Ilara had predicted. The overload cascaded through the quantum entanglement matrix, disrupting tertiary nodes throughout the outer rim and crippling the architect's ability to restore network functionality. But the cost was 47 ships and over 2,000 lives. "Network disruption is now at 85%, the operations coordinator reported quietly. "Architect communications are fragmenting across multiple sectors." But even as they celebrated their success, new alerts began appearing on the tactical displays. The architects were no longer focusing on defensive measures, they were beginning to retaliate. Multiple contacts emerging from rift apertures throughout Union space. The sensor operator announced with alarm. "Configuration unknown, but energy signatures are off the charts." What appeared on the displays defied every assumption about architect capabilities. The ships, if they could be called ships, were massive organic constructs that seemed to grow and change even as they moved. They incorporated technology that violated known laws of physics, creating gravitational fields and energy discharges that no conventional vessel could withstand. "They're not just ships," Dr. Kim observed with scientific fascination and horror. "They're living weapons created specifically for this conflict." The architect retaliation was swift and devastating. Within hours, they had reclaimed several critical network nodes and begun implementing what appeared to be accelerated optimization protocols on captured resistance personnel. The reports that came in were nightmarish. Entire crews converted into biological components of architect systems while retaining their memories and awareness. "We need to escalate our attacks," Admiral Chen decided grimly. "If we can't finish this quickly, we'll lose the initiative completely." "What about the Core Worlds Protocol?" Captain Quinn asked from her position with the Special Operations Fleet. The Core Worlds Protocol was their most desperate contingency plan, a direct attack on the architect installations surrounding Earth and the other founding worlds of the Union. It would require every ship they had, and would almost certainly result in massive casualties, but it might be their only chance to strike at the heart of architect power. "Do it," Admiral Chen ordered. "All forces implement Core Worlds Protocol. This is our final shot." As the combined resistance fleet moved toward the Core Worlds, Ilara found herself aboard the Salvation's Hope, once again serving as scientific advisor for the most important battle in galactic history. The familiar corridors of the ship felt like home now, and the crew had become her family in ways she had never experienced during her solitary life as a Union researcher. "Whatever happens," Captain Quinn said as they approached the final battle, "we've already accomplished something unprecedented. We've shown the galaxy that the architects aren't invincible, and that organic life won't submit to optimization without a fight." "Is that enough?" Ilara asked, watching the massive architect installations growing larger on their displays. It has to be, Quinn replied simply, because it's all we have. The Battle of the Core Worlds was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Thousands of ships from dozens of species fought against architect installations that had been growing in power for decades. The combat was three-dimensional, spanning multiple star systems, with battles ranging from planetary surfaces to the depths of space. Alara coordinated quantum disruptor attacks from the Salvation's Hope, while Captain Quinn led coordinated strikes against the most critical network nodes. Around them, the largest fleet ever assembled by organic species fought desperately against technology that seemed almost godlike in its capabilities. "Primary installation is destabilizing," Zara reported with excitement. "Whatever we're doing, it's working." But even as they achieved their objectives, the cost was becoming clear. Half the resistance fleet had been destroyed or disabled, and architect retaliation was intensifying by the hour. The organic ships simply couldn't match the technological superiority of their opponents. "Admiral Chen, to all units," came the transmission from Central Command. "We've achieved critical network disruption, but we can't hold our positions much longer. All ships prepare for general withdrawal." "Captain," Alara said quietly, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the remaining architect installations. I think they're preparing something big." What the architects were preparing turned out to be a weapon that could sterilize entire star systems, converting all organic matter into raw materials for their construction projects. The energy readings were beyond anything in known physics, suggesting technology that could reshape matter at the quantum level. "We can't let them complete that weapon," Captain Quinn decided grimly. "Rook is the Salvation's Hope, capable of kamikaze protocols." "Captain, no," Alara protested. "There has to be another way." "Sometimes there isn't," Quinn replied sadly. "Sometimes you just have to trust that what you're fighting for is worth the sacrifice." But before the Salvation's Hope could implement its final attack, something unexpected happened. Throughout the battlefield, Union ships began changing sides, turning their weapons against architect installations instead of resistance forces. "This is Admiral Harrison of the Union Fleet," came a transmission on all frequencies. "We've learned the truth about the architect optimization programs. All Union forces implement protocol liberation. We're joining the resistance." The arrival of Union reinforcements turned the tide of battle decisively. Within hours, the combined organic fleet had destroyed the primary architect installations and disrupted the network so thoroughly that restoration would take decades. The immediate threat was over. As the smoke cleared from the greatest battle in galactic history, Alara found herself back at the observation deck of Central Command, looking out at a galaxy that had been forever changed. The architect network was crippled, the Union was in chaos, and billions of beings were suddenly free to determine their own destinies for the first time in centuries. "What happens now?" she asked Captain Quinn, who had survived the battle despite her willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. "Now we build something better," Quinn replied, with the first genuinely optimistic smile Alara had seen from her. "The architects showed us what the galaxy looks like when a single species tries to impose its vision on everyone else. We need to make sure that never happens again." "And how do we do that?" "By remembering that diversity isn't chaos, it's strength. The galaxy is big enough for every species to find their own path, as long as we're willing to respect each other's right to exist." As Alara watched the ships of dozens of species working together to rescue survivors and repair damage from the battle, she realized that the real victory wasn't the destruction of the architect installations. It was the proof that organic life could unite when faced with a common threat, and that even the most advanced technology couldn't overcome the combined will of free beings. The future was uncertain, and there would be many challenges ahead as the galaxy reorganized itself without Union or architect control. But for the first time since her rescue from the drifting Artemis, Alara felt genuine hope for what lay ahead. She had helped save organic civilization from optimization and enslavement. Now she could help build something better, a galaxy where every species could pursue their own destiny among the stars, free from the fear of forced perfection. The view from the observation deck showed her a galaxy full of possibilities, and Alara Miles, former Union scientist and current freedom fighter, smiled as she contemplated the work that lay ahead. The stars were calling, and for the first time in her life, she was ready to answer.